Peru's President Pedro Castillo has announced a dissolution of Congress and called for legislative elections to draft a new constitution. That comes hours before an impeachment debate. Now, members of the Constitutional Court described the move as a coup. The situation is moving very fast and furious right now. Shery Ahn of Bloomberg Daybreak Asia joins us now. Shery, what happened?
I mean, we have seen political turmoil so often in Peru since the election of Pedro Castillo that when I actually saw the headline, I was like, okay, another impeachment debate. Because this is now the third attempt that they're trying to do this. This is a country where it's really easy to actually remove the head of state through an impeachment. We have seen Martin Vizcarra in 1990, for example, in 2020, for example, already be removed from office. And we have seen so much volatility in Peru because, remember, this election of Pedro Castillo was very contested. 18 months ago, he went against Keiko Fujimori, and that's the daughter of the former president who actually went ahead and did this autogolpe or self-coup in 1992. And this is the last time when we actually saw such a state for Peru. And now we are seeing more of these efforts by Pedro Castillo to actually get his own way. This time around, we don't know if the armed forces will back the president. So really, the political turmoil just getting worse, and the president just taking a further step in that direction.
And Shery, clearly you've been watching the market reaction as well. Probably one of the obvious ways to look is what's happening in the currency world. But just in general, the market's interpretation of what's going on right now, what's been your observation?
Yeah, the Peru sol has been really tumbling since we got the latest announcement by the president. It's really interesting that today is also the day that in the afternoon we were going to get the monetary policy decision from the Peru Central Bank, where they were expected to hike rates for a 17th consecutive time because they're dealing with really, really widespread inflation that, of course, is not only an issue for Peru, but for the broader region. So it's a very interesting day to have such political developments, and it will really not help the broader economic picture when you have currency depreciation, when you have inflationary pressures really hurting the Peruvian public, and on top of that, more political turmoil.
Does Peru have an actual democracy?
That is really a key question for many of these Latin American economies. There was a proper election. There was a proper runoff against Keiko Fujimori, and Pedro Castillo did get the vote from the presidential elections. We were expecting this impeachment debate or attempt again to happen. Congress would have needed 80 out of 130 lawmakers to make that happen. That didn't happen. Right now, if it does go ahead with the dissolution of Congress, if it does go ahead and really tries to rewrite the Constitution, there are big questions about the legality of it all.
Shery, I want to switch gears here and focus on China. Another global story the markets have been tracking today on many fronts. On the one hand, the reopening plan is something the market has been reacting to in a big way in recent days. And now we seem to have some economic broad strokes from the government in terms of what they would like to achieve heading into next year. But there's still complications in the near term, and we saw that in the trade data. What stands out to you on the China front today?
When I woke up this morning and I saw that Chinese officials were debating the 5% economic growth targets for 2023, my first thought was, really, that sounds quite ambitious given the fact that they're expected to only grow 3.2% this year, which is far, far removed from that 5.5% that they were targeting. But yes, you talked about those COVID restrictions being eased, and there seems to be a definitive shift away from COVID zero, not only because we're seeing 10 new measures coming out from the National Health Commission on how to really ease the transition away from COVID zero, but also because we had the Politburo statement and we didn't hear anything about that dynamic zero COVID approach, which has been mentioned throughout the past 2 years. So perhaps right now the idea from Beijing is that all this reopening will lead to revenge spending, revenge trouble that will support the economy. But you mentioned those trade numbers. When global economic demand is slowing and you have November export numbers contracting the most since the start of the pandemic, that really raises big questions. And a lot of things have to go right for China to achieve that new, perhaps 5% growth target. We'll see if they actually confirm that in the National People's Congress in March.